Thank you so much. You've actually answered a lot of my questions already, so I hope that the audience will have questions as well, and I'm going to copy Norman Mailer by saying that I think we have a very sophisticated audience tonight. Is it true? Did you say that you're not sure whether you watched the film or not?
I honestly can't remember if I've sat and watched it, really. I never watch anything that I do because I don't want to become self-conscious about the way I do things. I don't want to parody myself. I don't want to, if I see that I've done something that was kind of cute, I don't want to repeat it. It's a bit like reading reviews, you know. You've got a number of choices. You can read a review and react against it. Or you can read a review and decide, you can fall for your own publicity and decide that you'll do more of the same. If you're really going to have, if you're going to be able to tap into your own creativity, you have to just ignore it. I know it sounds very arrogant, but I think you just do have to do it. And here we are, we're daughters, and we are vulnerable, and it hurts. I read a review of The Female Eunuch which said that it needed to be edited, that it was rubbish from beginning to end. And I remember telling myself that I was not going to pay attention to it. And I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning with every word in neon. I was just thinking, Jesus, you know, if it's true, I have to get over it. And if it's not true, it's just destructive and stupid. So I do television all the time, and I never watch it. Occasionally it comes up and hits me in the face because it'll be a trailer for something, and I'll think, oh, Jesus Christ, got to do something about the hair or the face or the frock or the shoes.
But so how do you feel about watching it tonight then? Are you nervous?
No. No, I'm not. No, I'm not nervous.
Are you going to watch it?
Yes. Well, I might get a bit bored. Yeah, I'll watch it. Well, mainly because I need to have a bit of a think about how it was edited. I've just reread the thing I wrote about it. And I think, well, I would have edited it anyway. I would have taken out, well, obviously, I'm not going to repeat the whole thing. And I said to you today that I don't think there's any difference between fiction and non-fiction, because fiction exploits reality. You've got to put your streets in the right relation to the general lie of the land and so on. You can't just make it all up out of nowhere. And I also think that non-fiction is fictionalized as well, because you have to make it readable and make it a narrative, and life isn't a narrative. So I think I'm far enough away to be able to watch it now without being vain. I mean, I made the dress that I'm wearing.
I was just going to ask you about the dress and the little fur jacket that you're wearing.
No, it was a brown fox, I think, that was biting its own tail. Do you remember? You're too young. But in wartime, ladies wore things, these fox bodies around their necks.
I think we call it stola in Swedish.
We call it a stole as well. And I had a brown one of them. But I dropped it on the floor, I think, as I went to the podium.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's hanging kind of loosely from your chair, and you just, when you watch it, you're like, oh, never mind it. So
well, it looks like it might be my pet that I brought. My pet squirrel that I brought.
I think...
I did mean to send it up. I meant to send up the event because it was so expensive. It was $25 a ticket, which in those days was a lot of money. And I think there was an agitation by women outside saying, why couldn't they get in? Well, it was a fundraiser. That's why you can't get in. And so I wore my homemade dress that I made for a May ball in Cambridge, and the fox, which cost 50p or something.
Well, there are people standing in front of the town hall and yelling that you are a traitor and Germaine Greer don't care about the poor people. And that made me, when I watched the film last night, it made me think of that as a perfect illustration about how feminists are often treated in the debate, that there is often a sort of demand that you should be talking about something else than what you're actually talking about right now. There's also, in the town hall, there's also arguments saying that you should be talking about men. You're not speaking enough about men, and you're not speaking enough about the poor people.
That's all right. Doesn't worry me. I'm constantly being told what I should be talking about. And I generally ignore it. I think it's probably happened ever since I was born, that I was being told that I wasn't irrelevant, because one has one's own idea of what is relevant. But it's always been an interesting thing about socialism, that if you're a socialist, you're meant to be miserable. You can't drink champagne if you're a socialist. Well, why not? I mean, why can't you choose that you're going to buy champagne instead of something else? The idea seems to be that you've got to be wretched. I think it's a distortion of Lutheranism, by the way. So it's probably quite familiar to Swedish people.
True. You gave the documentary its name when you said in reply to Norman Mailer that you didn't want to have to defend yourself against hecklers in the town bloody hall. And I think probably the reason why this documentary has become a sort of cult classic or a legendary film has a lot to do with your appearance and the way you make your speech, and also a little bit about the dress maybe, and the fox, just tiny little bit. But I believe that when my generation fantasized about the early 70s, when we were born, I think that's what we imagined that it was always like, that you always had these discussions, lively, good-humored, and still very important discussions on politics. Was it like that?
No, I don't think so. A lot of the time when I was involved in television, talk shows and things like that, it was really important for the host to be rude to me, because that was how he was going to get his audience on side. They expected him to destroy me. And it was often really crude and stupid. And what they didn't know is that I had experience in television, because I'd been working in television as a comedian, actually. But it meant that I had some idea of how you use the medium. So they would read out quotations from the book in a satirical voice. And so I would wait and then grab it from him and say, right, let's have another look at these, shall we? And I would read them again in a reasonable voice. And I used to have a bet that the people in the control room, many of whom would be women, hated this guy because he was clearly a prick. And that if I did this, the camera would stay on me, because that's what you need to know. You need to know that they'll stay with you. And so I'd read it again to camera, and they'd be going, I could see them going, yes, yes, yes. While I said, you know, most women have very little idea of how much men hate them. Is that a ridiculous thing to say? I haven't said that all men hate all women all of the time. What I've said is women don't know when men hate them and when they don't, which is why they keep getting killed. And so it would go on like that. So, and that became pay dirt, and then people knew in those days that was going to happen. If I came into the studio, there would be this fight. And most of the presenters in those days, as now, were men. So, you know, David Letterman, where is the woman who is David Letterman? There isn't one. And you'd have to go in there loaded for bear. I mean, you were going to shoot your way through that thing one way or the other. And it was often really crude. I mean, sometimes I would actually flinch at the way I was spoken to. And there's quite a few things on YouTube which people have put up because they're so incredulous. You know, how no one would speak to a woman now in the way that I was spoken to then. But it made it easier for me in a way, because their rudeness was so obvious that it was really easy for me to get round behind it. And you realize if you're doing early morning magazine television that the people watching are women. And they'll watch because they like the presenter. But then something happens and they think, hey, maybe he's not as cute as I think he is.
But so this experience, is this the reason why you today have a reputation of being able to destroy any combatant in a debate?
Well, I think there's a number of things there. One was that Bill Buckley, who had a huge following in America, came to Cambridge and did a debate with me in which he was destroyed, mainly because he was badly prepared. It was easy. And if you've been trained in the sort of Cambridge debating setup, he was a lamb, you know, I just slaughtered him. But then the thing that was extraordinary about that was that he went on showing the program. It's still shown. There's generations of people have seen this humiliation because his greed was even greater than his pride.
So you're continually destroying him now. I don't know about you, but I think many of us here probably have a feeling of longing for this kind of discussion. Maybe not now, after you've punctured what actually happened at the town hall, but I think there's a feeling of longing for having an open discussion about politics or feminism or anything. And I don't know, do you think the climate for discussion has changed?
Well, I think it's really important to understand that there are not two sides to every question. And debate is a profoundly delusive process. That just setting down, what happens in televised debate, for example, is you get people on this side who have nothing in common with people on the other side, and all they do is shout at each other, and none of the terms of the discourse is ever refined. You never work out if there's any common ground, if there's any way we can go forward, because what everybody wants is sparks. They want hostility. It's built on the same premise as a boxing match, and you want somebody to win, which is idiotic. And ultimately, I think we have to understand that we need to listen to all the shades of opinion about something, and we need to look for what they have in common. They generally have a point of departure which they have in common, and we should be thinking much harder about how we arrive at consensus. How do we avoid the hostages that we take because we roll over? The most obvious case now at the moment, I would think, is the confrontation between Islamic sense of values and Western values. And I would always be for libertarianism. I would always be against censorship. I would be against veiling. I would be against Sharia law in almost all of its manifestations. But I need to understand something. I need to understand why it is that women are voting for Sharia law. I want them to tell me what they think about my lifestyle, which frightens them and revolts them in many ways. I've got to listen to that, no matter how painful that is. And I can't simply refute it in some kind of overeducated, overweening, arrogant kind of way. I have to actually register. I have to find out, and I get into trouble for this all the time. I keep saying, you have to work out why Muhammad was so successful. He was successful because he raised the lowest people to the dignity of being the pure, the pak. They were no longer rubbish. They could be pure in that they washed themselves 5 times a day, they prayed, they lived according to a very strict and demanding lifestyle, and this gave people dignity, which under the old caste systems and so on, they hadn't got. So we have to think how we can make common ground with that. We can't just ignore it because its cultural force is massive. And right now, we're not doing very well in confronting it. We haven't even got a way of talking to it. Meanwhile, here in Sweden and in England, women are adopting the veil. We're having to think, my God, why are they doing that? And they're doing that because something about the way our society has developed is for them frightening and repulsive. And I would make that connection with pornography, because pornography is never satisfied. You know, it's degraded women to a point now where, you know, the hardcore pornography features women who are underage from disadvantaged environments who are horribly degraded. And this is entertainment. What is this? How do we let this happen? Well, if you, like me, are against censorship, we can't outlaw it quite, but we have to understand its appeal. And instead, what we've got to deal with is 50 Shades of Grey. You feel like opening a vein, don't you?
So where would you turn to for interesting debate about this, or interesting discussions on this topic?
Well, I don't have an answer to that question, but I want to tell you something extraordinary, which is in the middle of all this anguish and destruction. A group of women wrote to me from Syria, and they said, we would like to publish The Female Eunuch. And all I could think was, my God, I thought I was brave. You women are insanely brave. You're going to do this
This is what it
thing?
looked like when it was published in Sweden.
How you really... so, of course, I said, the rights are yours. Go right ahead. Just do it. And all the time I was thinking, oh, please. And I was a bit bossy. I said I need to see the Arabic because I have to know that it's in beautiful Arabic. You know, Arabic is a very various language. It's a whole group of dialects, and I didn't want it to be... But how are they going to do the whole chapter called abuse in classical Arabic? I mean, it's a real problem. So I think it's going on now there. And it's so much more serious than it ever was for us. Because for us, it was a lifestyle choice. For them, it's a choice of life or death. And that's serious.
We're going to have a couple of questions from the audience, I hope. I'm just
Can we have a bit more light? There you all are out there in the gloom.
First, I'm just going to say that I think it's so funny that Norman Mailer, he talks a lot about feminists not being funny, not having a sense of humor in Town Bloody Hall. And so I just have to show you something that I picked up at my office, and I had to search a bit for this. You were talking about, you were talking about doing underground press, and I found this, a copy of Suck, first European sex paper. This is number 4. And Germaine has a piece in it. Do you remember what it's about?
Well, there was several, but you realise this is worth a huge amount of money.
I know. I brought
Just
it in my
be
portfolio.
careful.
Sorry, I'm going to show you. Bounce, titty, bounce.
Oh. I thought it was much worse than that, actually. I was really steeling myself for the full-page view of my anus.
Yeah, because you have post in this magazine, and I think it's this piece is on the female body. It's a great read, but I think I would just like to show the backside of this Suck. It's a Dutch magazine. And here we have, it's not you, no. But this is a vagina posing as a man, I think. I think it's wearing a tie and like a leather jacket or something.
Yeah, but you realise in those days you were allowed to have pubic hair. And now all our daughters and granddaughters are really having full Brazilians because the boys think if they don't, they're not groomed and they're not clean. That is so crazy and so anti-feminist that women are still trying to contour themselves to be acceptable to men, because they haven't even understood the basic principle of misogyny. It doesn't matter what they do. There'll still be this core of rejection because men are brought up to reject their own feminine side.
And at this time, it was different. I think this is from, I think you had just released The Female Eunuch when this was out. And
A bit before that.
It says, on this backside, it says, cut a long dotted line, suck, the only newspaper you can fuck.
I don't think I had anything to do with that.
I don't know if we have that much time. Do we need to be on time, or can we?
5 more minutes.
Oh, okay.
Probably because the projectionist rules, okay?
Exactly. So, is there a question for Germaine?
Not from a man.
Yes?
The second one can be from a man, but not the first. Okay. Please.
I think you will get a mic. And it would be great if you would give your name, please.
Yes. My name is Alexandra Esser, and I have a question about white America. I have the right to vote, and I just recently learned that we have a feminist, environmentalist, almost even Marxist candidate that seems extremely serious and seems to have a big following. Do you have any thoughts on this? It seems like, oh my God, in Sweden we have the Feminist Party and she's super great, and we got to believe in the struggle. And do you have any thoughts on this?
I'm just wondering who the candidate is.
Her name is Jill Scott, and of course we know why we don't know anything about that.
Well, I'm glad to know her name. Can't vote for her. I presume only the people in her electorate can vote for her, which means that, and even if she gets in, she's going to be in a pretty unenviable position, because what happens to most Green parties is they have to make dishonorable alliances in order to just be able to be still there. Ecofeminism is a real thing. It develops as soon as 20th century feminism comes into existence. You begin to hear women, for example, the women at Greenham Common, their whole argument was about the fate of the planet. We realize that for certain people, the thought of us having to leave this planet because we screwed it up and go and screw up some more planets is acceptable. We think that's what happens in a dynamic race, that we will expand and take our lifestyle and values and whatever with us. The thing is, if we don't take our microbes with us, we won't survive anyway. So we're going to have to take a whole sort of chunk of earthlings will have to go, including, you know, the microbes that live in your gut and the creatures that live in your eyelashes and everything else. We'll have to take them all with us to whatever poor little planet we decide we can bugger up. I think really that probably we could argue that ecofeminism is the feminism of the future, but that's only if the great struggle that is coming our way doesn't eventuate. And the scary thing is that our masters really want a war with Iran. They really want a showdown. They're saying that they want to intervene in Syria. And they don't seem to have understood that they'll be intervening on the side of the Muslim Brotherhood. And one of the reasons why we had the Quisling governments we had was in order that they would control Islam and impose secular government. Well, secular government has failed, and this is a massive problem for the world, and we're not vaguely ready to confront it. We have no idea how to begin a dialogue. There is no dialogue. They will not hear us. We have been dominating the cultural interchange. All the noise that's been made has been ours, and now they're saying, we're not listening. It's over. We're not listening.
Anyone else?
Hello, my name is Åsa Regnér, and I was until Friday the head of the Swedish Organization for Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights in Sweden. It's called RFSU. And you mentioned your engagement for abortion rights earlier. And I was just wondering about your comment. In Europe today, 3 countries ban abortion already, or within the European Union. And 4 countries might be coming in. Spain might change their law to the worse. Romania, Slovakia and Hungary have said they might change their laws to the worse from my point of view. Also, we know that in more than 20 states in the US, there have been very degrading, they can't change the law, the federal law, but they have lots of regulations, really just very degrading and making women crawl, so to speak. And I was just wondering, that's my opinion. Do you have any comment on that? Do you have any, and do you miss any arguments in the debate today? Is there anything that people should do who are in favor of abortion rights that they or we don't do?
Well, it's really difficult because the actual reality about abortion has changed enormously in the last 40 years. We know nobody thinks of the morning after pill as an abortifacient, but it is. So they keep telling us how many abortions are happening, and you think, which abortions are you counting? The data is hopeless. It's a complete mess. There's no agreement about the categories that they are using. At the moment in England, there has been a tremendous fuss about the fact that the Health Secretary of the Conservative government has stated that he thinks that the time limit for abortion should be 12 weeks instead of 24. Instead of saying, oh, do fuck off, you idiot, they actually pretended it was a serious proposition, which of course it isn't. And you know why? Because the medico-legal establishment will get up on its hind legs and say, forget it. Forget it, because it's going to impact on our immensely lucrative industry, which is reproductive technology. Reproductive technology involves the making of fetuses or blastocysts in order to destroy them, extraordinarily summary judgments about whether they're any good, whether one petri dish has got a better specimen than another petri dish. I mean, it is extraordinary, the power that the fertility barons, I call them, in England, have arrogated to themselves. And no one is going to cross them. So we didn't win the right to abortion, you know. We marched. We could have marched till our feet bled. It wouldn't have made any difference. It was the medico-legal establishment that said, we need to be free to do this, that, and the other. We're going to decide what gets born, what doesn't, what gets implanted, what doesn't. And you could argue that that was a loss for women right at that point, because the people they were working on were women. And they drove them crazy. They made them sick. They took enormous amounts of money from them. They knew perfectly well that there were real health problems with hyperstimulation of the ovary. They've never actually told the truth about that. The whole thing is an absolute mess. And it's all very well for people of one religious persuasion or another to say that they would rather that abortion didn't happen, da-da-dee-da. That's down to the individual. It's against your religion, don't do it. No one's forcing you to do it. At least I hope no one's forcing you to do it. I mean, what people are telling me is that in Sweden, Down syndrome babies are not being born anymore. Well, we know why that would be, because the pressure on the parents is such that they eventually accept the idea that they shouldn't have a Down syndrome baby. When I had fertility treatment, I was told by my surgeon that if I became pregnant, I had to have amniocentesis. And I said, why? I give a lot of love to my cat. Why can't I have my baby? My baby will be a much more rewarding person to love than my cat. No, he said, I put in a lot of effort here. I spent a 4-hour operation sorting out your fallopian tube and I'm not having a faulty baby. It's not happening. You will accept amniocentesis. So not surprisingly, I didn't go back to him. I didn't get pregnant either, which is probably a blessing. I think being my child would be really tough for anybody. But anyway, but the interesting thing about the discourse in England is that there they are saying, we can keep babies alive at this many weeks and that many weeks. And nobody's saying, yes, but should we? You can't ask that question. Everybody goes cold. If you say that these babies that you're keeping breathing when their lungs aren't formed properly, where you have to operate on their eyes because the oxygen you've given them is causing detachment of the retina and all of that, you think you're entitled to do that. What exactly is the point? What are you doing here? You can't ask that question. That discourse is never made. So, and yet every GP you talk to will tell you that the health problems attendant on prematurity and extreme prematurity are serious. And it's the child who has to deal with them and not the parent. The whole discourse is infantile and it's not going anywhere. It's because it's, again, people shouting from opposite sides of the room. There's nobody sitting down and trying to work out a 21st century morality given the number of interventions that we are capable of carrying out and the kinds of pressure we're under to accept what to me are really not acceptable procedures. It's a mess. It's a hopeless mess. When you say that there are countries that have outlawed abortion, are you saying they've outlawed it altogether or they've outlawed it at certain stages in the pregnancy?
Ireland and Malta ban it, basically, and then Poland have different...
Catholic countries both. Well, these are battles that have to be fought on the ground in those countries, and they are culturally specific. One of the things that's always got me and made me angry, really angry, is that women have been compelled to demand abortion as if it was a privilege, when actually it's a painful duty. It's invasive, it's humiliating, and it's usually the end of a series of forced decisions, of an increasing loss of control. No woman wants to start a pregnancy in order to end it, in order to truncate it. So you're actually saying, my life is out of control, please help me get it back under some sort of control. I don't think we can talk about freedom in the abortion connection unless we can show that you have a genuine option to raise your child. If you have to have an abortion because you'll lose your place at school or at university, or you won't get a job, or you won't be able to survive, then that's not a free decision, it's a forced decision. If we're to have access to abortion, we have to have access to free childcare as well. And then it's a genuine decision. Otherwise, it's women having to accept a sad and painful duty. And we've been obliged to pretend that it didn't hurt. We have had no option to grieve for it. There is nowhere we can go. We're supposed to say thank you. It's all wrong. And until we are actually speaking in our own person, and we are able to declare our own priorities, abortion will be a rod they use to beat us with. And I am not happy about it. Mm.
Anyone else? Ja, Anna?
Just a last question. We are so occupied with our own day-to-day work and our struggles, and here to have an equal film business is really, even though equality can be, in your opinion, wrong. But if we sort of turn to Syria or to all the other countries where women really are fighting for their lives, what would you say would be the greatest thing we can do to support them? What should we as women do to support our sisters?
Well, we may not have the privilege of doing anything because they may not ask us. You know, in the past, we have done things like say that we were against female genital cutting, and we were throwing our weight around saying that this was wrong and against women's self-determination and so on, because we assumed that it was done by men or for men, because we didn't listen to anything the women were saying. We also didn't apparently understand that we were doing it to ourselves. That, you know, women, one of the commonest operations in our society is reduction of the labia, of the clitoral size in newborn girls, if it's considered to be anomalous. We don't discuss it. We pretend it doesn't happen. We also have operations to reduce the size of a labia minora, where women think because they project beyond the labia majora, they're wrong and they look bad, and they're told they look bad. It's like our little daughters thinking they mustn't have pubic hair because it's dirty. And so it goes on. Instead of understanding the continuity, or even why it is that women may consider that they want to tidy themselves up, in inverted commas, we may think that they're misled. We may think that it's wrong, but it's the mote in our eye. It's the thing that stops us seeing straight that we have the right to remove. We haven't got the right to tell somebody else what it is they cannot see. So we have to wait until we are called upon. But I think you'll find that for lots of women, in the Islamic world in particular, they will consider that we have betrayed ourselves because our biggest cultural export is pornography. And pornography comes into your intimate life. It's in your husband's head when he's making love to you. It penetrates every part of your life. And if that's what they're reacting against, and I think it may well be, I mean, I was quite shocked to discover how universal pornography is in North Africa, that you can go into a cafe for a cup of coffee and there's hard porn being projected on the walls. Women don't go into those places. But imagine if your husband is doing that every day. You might feel very angry about it because it's actually coming between you and him. And you may have a very high view of what your relationship is to him. Mightn't be predicated on orgasm. That's not always the issue. So we have got to stop telling the rest of the world what to do, stop presenting our notion of liberation as the only notion of liberation. We have to start listening and not talking. But you'll find the women are not speaking to us. And that's why it was so extraordinary for me to get this request from the women in Syria. I felt terrified for them. I don't want them to carry a banner with my name on it if it gets them killed. That's the last thing I want. I don't want to be a shibboleth or an image or an idol or anything in that situation, because in my naivete, I think reason is our only way out of this. And I just don't know how much time we've got, because things are happening so fast. I think we've got to wait to be asked. And we're going to have to deal with the fact that we may never be asked, because we'll be considered to have betrayed ourselves. And in that, I would take responsibility, because I never joined the battle against pornography and prostitution, never. Because it didn't fit with my libertarian convictions, and I'm still a libertarian, but it may turn out to be a luxury that we haven't got.
A great thank you for Carolina and Germaine.